Hey everybody, it's Bust, continuing our discussion of the Legends of Runeterra Standard Rotation 2024 preview. That's a mouthful. It's so many words, I got it all out in one breath this time. Look at me go. But nonetheless, we've covered off on 4 of the factions so far. We've done Runeterran Champions, Bandle City, then we did Demacia and Bilgewater. Today we'll be at about that halfway mark, touching on Freljord and Ionia. If you haven't been following along, or if you haven't caught this article on the main Play Runeterra site, I highly recommend it. The Rotation 2024 preview article from I Am Walrus gives you a lot of insight and understanding in terms of what Riot was trying to accomplish with the upcoming rotation. For me personally, what I think the big factor and goal of rotation should be is really fixing up the color pie, the faction pie. That's where you are stating what factions are good at and what they're bad at. I felt like there was a lot of movement forward with that with the last rotation, and I was really hoping that this one would kind of catch up and get us there the rest of the way. And so if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, if you look at, say, Noxus, what is Noxus good at in terms of removal spells? They tend to do things through strikes and combats, right? They're a very fighty style faction, and so it makes a lot more sense that the units are out there punching each other and stuff. And so you see things like Whirling Death with Draven throwing his axes at an opponent. That's a very physical kind of thing. And so why was Calling Strike a Noxan removal spell, right? It's a 3-mana spell. It destroys a unit with 3 or less attack. It doesn't really tie into that idea of fights and punching stuff and savagery and the like. And so it was moved over to Shadow Isles, to where the attack power matters style of removal spells really seem to live, and where it's been expanded on with things like Quietus and the AoE Calling Wind or something. And so it just makes a lot of sense. And so that's what I was really hoping to see come out of this rotation, right? As more cards are released into the game, it gives Riot more opportunities to take out the cards that just don't fit and replace them with cards that do. And the reason I'm bringing so much wind and noise into this is I feel like Freljord is one of the factions that really was nailed by Riot, right? If we were to say, what kind of combat tricks are Freljord good at? What do they look like? They tend to be toughness boosters, right? You see Elixir of Iron that only boosts toughness. You see things like Sky Splitter that give +1 attack but +3 health on the top end. You see things like Blood Pact, maybe, right? The Braum card, it costs 4 mana, gives 2 of your units +3 health. And so you tend to see that much more towards the health end of the spectrum instead of the attack end. In terms of removal spells, what are they good at? Directly removing things, not so much. You can temporarily do it with things like Entombs, but it tends to be Frostbites, which remove the opposing attack, and then it tends to be things like AoE Avalanche style of things. And so there would be Avalanche and Ice Shards and the like, something that deals damage to all of the units on the board. Otherwise, in terms of the units themselves, they all tended to be meteor and combat effective, a lot of animal type things with overwhelms, and a lot of ways to stat boost those units with a lot of +2/+2 effects across the board with things like Omen Hawk and the Attack Dog and whatever. That was all laid out very well to me with Freljord, and it doesn't really feel to me like they need much of an upgrade. And I feel like this gets kind of carried along very well through the set of rotational changes that we're going to see here. They're taking out the linear stuff, as they mentioned in that article. We're seeing a lot of the Lysandra kit completely pulled out, and then we're starting to see some of the stuff in here that just doesn't quite fit come out as well. And so it's not a plunder-centric faction anymore, right? Back in the days of the Rising Tides, where Sejuani came out, that's where Plunder came into the game, and some of that stuff was added to Freljord. And so you have the Activator and the Tusk Speaker, and then you have the likes of Plunder cards like Shared Spoils and Spoils of War. Now that Plunder is a Bilgewater/Noxan kind of thing, makes sense to pull these out. That's all well and good. Otherwise, we are seeing some of those linear strategies pulled out. You see the Frozen Thrall theme getting yanked from the game as well. The Frozen Thrall, Draculorn Inquisitor, and the Entomb coming out. Very strange to me that Lysandra, is Lysandra just not in standard, right? It's like, what's the chicken and the egg here happening as to where Frozen Thrall is on this list, but Lysandra is not? So Lysandra was in the last standard, so I have no idea why she doesn't appear on this list, but all of her kit is gone. She's still in the game, apparently. It's the Nightfall problem of last year. But on the whole, I think this was done pretty well. You see a lot of cards that just don't work and don't thematically make sense. Things like Hunting Boar never really fit the bill. The transform mechanic is going, the plunder mechanic is going. Some of the old staples that don't completely fit those combat tricky style themes like Fury of the North and Battle Fury being removed as well. All in all, I think this looks like a fairly straightforward collection of changes, and I feel like this is a positive set of things to rotate. And so while I do get a little bit upset seeing Udyr go, I had loads of fun with Udyr. We did a lot of playing through the open tournaments with Udyr. Hopefully he'll still have some time to shine out there in the space of Eternal. And then if you're a big Rico Rexer out there, I'm sure you really hate seeing these overwhelms go. See Tryndamere go and the Mammoth Shaman, or the big one for old Rico, the Battle Fury going. It sucks. I I get it, but to me, these cards don't thematically make sense in terms of what Freljord is good at. Glad to see them go. In terms of the cards coming back in, this is where it's a bit of a bummer for me. Like, I get it. As someone out here in the content creator space, you do get kind of a touch and feel of what people are really into, and the Battle Scars theme is really on point. If you're looking to just snatch some views out there on the people from YouTube, just make a video that has Braum and Vladimir in it, and it's going to be one of your best videos of the quarter. You could probably release a Battle Scars video every day of the week and still have that content come out there and do strong. And so I get why we see these things come back. Things like Braum and the Scar Grounds and Tarkaz and Scar Mother Virna. These are all Battle Scarsy type units. They're all fan favorites. They're coming back into Standard, fine. Now, am I excited to see them come back into Standard? No. I don't like these just really... I'm trying to think, it's kind of engine-centric type things come about. It tends to be if you're able to interact with it, you win, and if you can't interact with it, you lose. And so it's not my favorite thing to see hit the game, but I get it. It's fine. It's combat-centric. That's kind of okay to me. Welcome back. As far as these other cards go, there are some hits within here. Rhinefang Wolf is actually a spectacularly powerful unit. It did see a fair amount of play in Eternal. Has a lot going for it, being a kind of removal spell in Freljord while also carrying the dog tag. I think it's interesting to see him come back. But the card within here I actually did want to take a moment to speak to is Ancient Yeti. This is a very surprising one to see come back for me, in the sense of what are we doing with the Elder Dragon? And so I don't know if you've had a chance to play with cards like Ancient Yeti in the space of the Elder Dragon being out and about, but it's quite good and it's quite strong, and you can now include this in any deck. And so, like, this is one of the downsides to having the Elder Dragon be in the game, right? I mentioned this with like Rise and Aatrox as we were talking about the Runeterra champions, but having these build-around style of abilities that say you can include anything within your deck as long as it meets this constraint does give a lot of potential for abuse. And one of the things that Riot has to consider when looking at every single card in the game now is, can this be included within an Elder Dragon deck? And to me, the Ancient Yeti was one of these cards just primed and ready to be abused with the Elder Dragon. And now it's going to be able to do that in a standard format where you just don't have a ton of cards running around. And so this is right out the gates one of the things that I expect to see quite a bit of abuse from in standard is Elder Dragon Ancient Yeti. Very surprised that this was considered to be a card to bring back, but maybe we'll see more Yeti things in the future. Maybe this will work with Warden of the Tribes. There'll be a lot of opportunity to use this card. It's very powerful, but I do have to worry about this thing coming about with Eddie running around and being at the forefront of everyone's mind. Otherwise, Freljord looks pretty good to me. After that, we have the faction I have no business talking about. We are coming at this from Ionia. And while I had, many positive things to say about Freljord and the Color Pie and what they're good at and what they're not, I feel like that was kind of 50-50 in the space of what Ionia was good at. And so in the removal spell space, it feels very well defined, right? They're good at stuns, they're good at recalls. As far as the combat tricks go, I feel like that's where it's kind of tough to pull off. Where I'm going with that is it feels very strange to me to see a card like Syncopate get rotated out, right? If Ionia's combat tricks are going to be, very like tricky, fast movie kind of things and not really focused in on the stats, Syncopate really seems to fit to me. And so to me, what like an Ionian combat trick really feels like are cards like Syncopate that don't just directly boost stats, but they do help enhance a combat in some way. Same thing kind of applies to, say, the 1 mana spell that gives 1 attack and quick attack. It's like Dash or Quick Strike or something. That feels very Ionian to me. It's not granting a bunch of stats, it's granting that ability along the way. Same thing comes down here with Ghost that's now being rotated out of the format. Ghost was, unfortunate and just basically being a combo activator, but at the end of the day, this kind of feels like what Ionia is meant to be doing in combat, and so it's kind of strange to see these things go. And so with that, I'm not certain how that's going to get cleared up. It looks like Riot just completely disagrees with what I say as they pull out Syncopate and Flurry of Fists and Ghost, but it's tough to really define what the faction is meant to do when they're just kind of all over the place in what they're actually doing. Otherwise, that same vein lies with the units as well. And what I think at least Riot is trying to accomplish out of this patch is get to the point to where elusives are something that are supplementary within your deck and not necessarily just the main focus. And I hope that they're able to kind of push that forward. Elusive is an interesting mechanic when it's applied to a single kind of attacky unit, right? So Nora having elusive, kind of interesting. But when every unit in your deck is elusive and you're just trying your hardest to be non-interactive with your opponent, then that's where you get to the place that is just not that interesting. And so I think I am glad to see Greenglade Duo go. I'm glad to see some of these other elusives go. And I kind of hope that in the design space of elusive in the future, we see more stuff like Nora and less stuff like Ari, less stuff like Zed that are really just out here trying to abuse the non-interactivity and then just ace the game as quickly as you can. Otherwise, as far as these cards go, there is a lot of recall stuff within Ionia. That's what you are seeing kind of across the board with like the Shimon Wind and the Maker and the Singular Will and the Children of the Forest. And it's probably fine to just get rid of some of the garbage, get rid of some of the chaff, right? I would love to see, Singular Will pulled out and replaced with a playable epic. I would love to see Monastery of Harana pulled out and replaced with a playable epic. You can say this about so many of the Ionian cards, but they land very much in that space like Bilgewater, as to where everything that the faction is doing is so far all over the place that it's really hard to just like hone in on what they're supposed to be doing well. And so to me, this looks like, a great set of cards to be pulling out. These are all cards that are, kind of like fringe playable and not super abusive. I'm sure, if you are a big Karma enjoyer, you hate seeing her go, and a bit of, the real strength of her kit with things like the Shimon Wind being a quality pull and Concussive Palm being a quality pull makes sense. But to me, on the whole, it just feels like these are just garbagey, chaffy, poor quality kind of Ionia cards being removed. And hopefully they can just be replaced with stuff that's on a more firm power level, right? Most of these cards are closer, if we're going to rate them on a 0 to 10, most of these cards are closer to 0s than they are to 10s, right? Like, when was the last time you saw someone legitimately play in a constructed format Tailcloak Matriarch, Children of the Forest, Shadows of the Past, Monastery of Harana, Singular Will? Like, if you had to just stop and physically read these cards because you've never seen them, I wouldn't be surprised. These are not really the cream of the crop in terms of what's happening in Standard. And so, while I would love to see the faction get a little bit more identity in terms of what they're good at and what they're doing, I think it's fine to just pull all these bullshit, terrible cards out of the game. So that they can be replaced with something that is just stat effective or something that's just not pure garbage and bullshit. Now, I will say I am glad to see Karma go. I feel like you got to have a little bit of give and take with this. And so the Majin Bays and the Akaidos of the world having Karma get yanked from Standard would be something that I'm sure they would be very upset to see, but Zed gets taken out as well. And so us aggro enjoyers out here losing out on Zed, the control combo enjoyers out there losing out on Karma, everyone's upset, right? You can get that that meme picture of the dudes with the biceps and their interlocking hands and they're bringing down hate together. we can join together in the removal of Zed and the removal of Karma and everyone just being mad at Riot. But if the things coming back in, it's a very interesting space. Yasuo making his appearance, making his return. Now, I thought that Yasuo was going to be the doubled up champion, right? I thought there was some note that Yasuo was supposed to be like a second version champion like we see with Lux. Apparently, it's not the case, but the Yasuo is coming back along with the Windswept Hillock. And that's, kind of an interesting thing to me. Seeing the Windswept Hillock come back into the space of Standard, it did have a little bit of time to where Yasuo Katarina got to abuse the rallies with the Hillock, and I'm kind of curious if that thing comes back, or if Riot has decided that in looking at a card like the Gwen card, the Hallowed, what's it called? It's not the Hallowed Fountain. I know that's not it. Whatever the Gwen landmark is that would give you the Hallowed unit whenever you gained an attack token, you can still chain off getting multiple attack tokens in the same turn with the Windswept Hillock. I guess if it gets too abusive with rallies and stuff that they can just say the first attack token of the turn or however that is worded. But it's a card that's kind of primed and ready for abuse. The other thing I will say about this is it looks like a lot of the support cards are coming back. Lux being a support champion brought a lot of that stuff in with Demacia. You did see a lot of the support champions or the support followers come back there. You do see that happening here as well. Pix is a support champion. Flower Child cares about support. Fuzzy Caretaker cares about support. And so you do see a bit of that going back and forth. Very interested to see how that pans out. Historically, this has been a horrible collection of cards and not something that you were particularly interested in doing in Standard, but it does have some comeback with it. I guess also worth noting that Lulu, not listed down here with the Ionian champions. Oh, that's the ones taken out. Gotcha. The ones coming in, Yasuo, Lulu also coming back in. She was mentioned up here with Bandle City. And so another thing that does tie into that support style of role and that support style of deck. And so interesting to see. The last one to call out here before we go on the day, I think it was very interesting with the previous collection of cards to where we mentioned the Ancient Yeti coming in with the Elder Dragon. I'm pretty confident the Scattered Pod was recently taken from 6th cost down to 5. And it's not something that you have to worry about with the Elder Dragon. This card has been tuned like 5 or 6 times over the course of its history, and I'm interested to see where this kind of lands in Standard, right? It was taken down in cost in terms of, was it reduced in cost in terms of Elder Dragon? The other interesting thing with Scattered Pod is its ability to draw Wildfire. And Wildfire being nerfed up to 2 mana kind of aced it from its place in Standard a while ago, but now that Standard should be slower again, the opportunities are still there for the Wildfire deck to come back. The other card is still in the game, right? Isn't there some other thing that lets you choose to draw a slow, faster burst spell, and with Wildfire being the only slow spell, you just draw it every time? That might still be a thing in Standard. We'll have to kind of wait and see. But nonetheless, interesting stuff. Again, very happy with what Freljord has coming. That seems very good to me. Very on point and on theme with the faction. Ionia just needs to rip the Band-Aid off and be rebuilt from the ground up. And so hopefully these removal of just shit cards will allow better cards to come in and give them a place of being viable in Standard outside of ultra aggro decks with Zed and combo decks with Karma. And so, good stuff. That is going to do it for us today. I had fun with this. I hope you did too, because that is going to do it. So I hope everyone enjoyed the video. Hope you maybe learned a thing or two along the way. You had a good time watching. This is Bust, and we thank you for being here.